I'm a bit unsure of presenting on this subject so explicitly. If you're a specialist, you will probably recoil. If you're not, then I guess you shouldn't be paying any attention to my musings on the subject. I don't claim to be a theoretical physicist. I'm an artist, and don't have the math to understand the workings underpinning physical theory. When reading papers, in place of the mechanics, I find myself inserting mental images of my paintings or the experience of observing the environment. It's like reading with half the pages missing and taking up another book to find that aspects of the plot are to some extent interchangeable. Vision space theory is about trying to establish the links. As far as I'm concerned, the images don't simply overlay. I think they become entangled with the story, and then go on to suggest a means by which we can re-engage with some of the key theoretical questions of our time, deploying experiential objectivity. As after all, theories are all images. Vision space presents the basics of phenomenal field, a key component of experiential reality. There are plenty of vision space presentations that look at this in more detail. A working understanding of phenomenal field indicates important aspects about our relationship with the real. The structure of phenomenal field imposes certain functional requirements on the visual system, some of which to my mind have remained dark. Ultimately, all of this has to relate to the real world and to the nature of light that brings us the data on which it's all founded. Vision space points to quantum decoherence taking place within the retina, with the suggestion that as each discrete photon materializes, a related phase aspect is also retained, rather than dissipating harmlessly into the local environment of the membrane. If we don't make the connection with decoherence and receptor firing, we are left with just a single data potential in need of being cleaned up. We'll be surprised when the unrequired noise is not discarded but retained and reintroduced to influence receptive field activity. Then also why correlated firing is occurring and phase-like data being sent to the visual system. We'll be left trying to understand why we have developed two distinct visual pathways and just how it is that the complexities of visual awareness are generated from just one sparse and limiting data potential. We will also be left scratching our heads trying to understand just how perceptual awareness and perceptual reality relates to quantum reality, where it all came from. While this proposed decohered phase aspect is no longer comparable to the full density matrix or Eiger state it originated from, some phase relations being destroyed or put out of reach on a permanent basis, what's retained appears to be capable of subsequent organization into a form of classical phase space, its expression forming an integral part of visual process, playing a critical role within the phenomenon of vision and awareness in general. In phenomenological terms, the particle aspect setting the discrete and explicit what continuous measurement processing pathway about which we understand a good deal, and the contextual passive coherent aspect ultimately combining with multiple others from across the extent of the retina to unfold the contextual where characterization, about which comparatively little is understood. This aspect has essentially remained dark, and the issues obscured by association with optical blur and depth of field related data organizations. The ventral stream and its explicit contemplation of form objectifies aspects of conscious attention. The dorsal stream and implicit spatial awareness contextualizes the situation and orientates us subconsciously. The implicit form of spatial awareness derived from this information potential allows us to comprehend motion in flow, involving time-independent correlations that play out in what's termed peripheral vision. So the proposition is that not all the phase relations are destroyed or lost as decoherence takes place. An associated local phase package capable of contribution towards spatial awareness is passively absorbed through a recoil-free interaction with the membrane's receptors. Retained in the local environment of the receptor, this would constitute the origins of dark light, identified as early as 1940. Dark light transforms in neurobiological terms to dark noise and continues to make a contribution to cell firing through the retinal layers, including the correlated firing and phased output of ganglion cells. If we assume that this is decoherence taking place, then we can understand why it appears objectively to vision scientists as if dark light and dark noise are generated within the retina. Its generation put down to synaptic activity, because there isn't any other separate additional data input from the light array. To add to the confusion, the associated noise wouldn't have any objective meaning in itself. It wouldn't constitute a discrete measurement in its own right. Only when synthesized with multiple others around an imposed locus could it impart any meaningful impression of the spatial relationships within the real setting. But even then, always in terms of the organism's perceptual structure evolved and booted to develop the potential. There's no room for a machine here, no dimension for measurement to take place within. No continuous measurement process would realize it. The spatial meaning, or measurement-like interaction, is realized through the perceptual system generated by the sentient being, and so doesn't constitute a strictly scientific, objective measurement even when presented. It's subjective, stochastic in nature, but nonetheless generates a spatially meaningful and pertinent implicit impression of the environmental spatial context around the locus. In the explicit sense, a measurement is never made. However, the system encounters the world. This ability to encounter comes courtesy of quantum reality and quantum decoherence. The measurement problem is a shortcoming inherent in taking an exclusively explicit approach to understanding the nature of reality. We cannot take a measuring stick to the implicit. The suggestion is that the synthesis of all of these phase packets takes place as the locus or fixation is designated, following convergence within the main brain structures of the old brain or brain stem, via primarily the retinocollicular pathway. They are unfolded or seen in relation to the selection of what is to be observed. Population of the field structure with the spatial cues would be almost instantaneous once the locus had been given, and hence be in temporal advance of processes underpinning our conceptual assessments relating to objective form, these forming the ventral genicular cortical route. Perhaps the synthesis and field structure in the dorsal stream forms the basis for multi-sense integration. In general, science avoids realization of the implicit data potential, even if it knows of it and detects aspects of its influence, as the explicit toolset is not designed to interface with the implicit. Engaging with it involves the setting aside of the remote observer vantage point, the basis of scientific experimentation. And while this situation may be appreciated by some, there is currently no acceptable stepping-off point, no new platform. The position is debated endlessly, but not actioned for want of the turf to stand on. By understanding the nature of experiential reality, we would be in a better position to approach the fundamental nature of physical reality. A multidisciplinary academic programming architecture for vision space could provide that first base. In the past, science rarely encountered the experiential, although now, through key individuals, that situation is developing fast. The implicit structures of phenomenal field occur to us and not our instrumentation, with human objectivity becoming by necessity, in part, subjective. This is reality. Vision involves subjective experience of the local environment through a quantum delivery system, namely photons, a system of realization that we form a functioning part of, as the receiver. It follows that it becomes meaningless or counterproductive to take us out of an act of observation. Yet this approach still underpins our information systems, and we conduct ourselves on the basis of the results provided and theorize about them, and not the experiential reality we have evolved to engage with. We inhabit a world of mirrors. So the question is then, what exactly does our current instrumentation measure, if not the functional components of objective reality? If our instrumentation is not experiencing the constituent parts of a decohered data input that underpins our relationship with the real, what do these continuous measurements and records actually mean on an independent basis? We need, with significant emphasis placed on the imperative here, to understand the differential in order that we can make sense of our self-limiting approaches and at best incomplete mechanical records. Explicit measurement is only one aspect of what's required in coming to terms with the nature of reality, and as we all understand, there are issues with that. The approach is now limiting what's possible and not enabling it. In order to move forwards, to take action, we are going to need to embrace the experiential ontology, and examples of intuitive record, messy and unformulated as it often is, as representative of the most complete overview we have to hand with respect to the nature of reality, and work with it to establish a firm basis from which to move on. Our collective response to the nature of reality has to get experiential. As I see it, there is no option. We can't stand outside the implicit to observe it. We have to live it. Only if we do these things will we start to get some handles on implicit processing, and through that establish a methodology to deepen our relationship with the real.